Great. So welcome everybody to our K-3 Leadership Implementation Cohort Information Session. Really the goal of today's session is to give you information as to what the cohort will look like and really to give you the information that you'll need to decide whether this cohort is something that you feel like you would benefit from. And so our hope, of course, is at the end of the session that you'll say, yes, I can't wait to join and engage in this work. And so as we're going through today, feel free to drop questions into the chat. And I know Anisha will be checking that throughout, and several of our team members are on, so they may be able to answer as well. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Justin Browning. I'm the K-3 Field Implementation Coordinator here at the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy at the Atlanta Speech School. What that means is that I work with district leadership, school level leadership, educators, and support staff to successfully implement structured literacy practices and the science of reading in schools. And so a little bit more about me outside of my role is this is my second year on staff at the Rollins Center. I've actually been involved with the Rollins Center doing facilitator work with summer learning since 2015. It is my 12th year in education. I actually have kids in college now that I've taught, so that's a little frightening when you think about it. I was a previous turnaround school instructional coach. And like I said, I get to lead the field implementation work in this field implementation team here at the Rollins Center with our Literacy and Justice for All initiative. So Anisha, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anisha Donald, and I am one of the K-3 content developers here at the Rollins Center. I've been in education for about 17 years. I'm starting my 17th year this year. And prior to coming to the Rollins Center, I was a classroom teacher for several years, also an instructional literacy coach. And my previous job was I worked as an ELA specialist, elementary specialist at the Georgia Department of Education. So I am really excited to be here. This is my first year here at Rollins, and I am just very grateful to be working with people like Justin who are passionate about just providing high quality literacy instruction for all students. And I'm just happy to be here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move into talking about the Atlanta Speech School. So the Atlanta Speech School basically is a comprehensive language and literacy school, and we have several different programs here that are rooted in research-based practices found in brain science. And so in 2004, the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy was founded to share these practices with the greater community through professional development and a free online learning platform called Cox Campus. And so Cox Campus allows us to bring our science-grounded approach to a larger worldwide audience. So today you're going to hear us talking a lot about Cox Campus because we're going to be doing much of our work utilizing the information on Cox Campus. So we're really excited to be able to kind of take the things that are happening at the Atlanta Speech School and through the use of the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy and bringing Cox Campus content to everyone pretty much worldwide. Next slide, Justin. So here at the Atlanta Speech School, we are committed to powerful, direct learning to students. That's what we do. And we also know that in order to have deep impact, we must commit to expanding the reach beyond the students that we see here at the Atlanta Speech School. And so this is where the Rollins Center and Cox Campus come into play. So through the Rollins Center, we're able to reach a broader audience with site-based coaching, with professional development, and community building. And so then we're able to take all of that information and also utilize Cox Campus to amplify those programs and practices that we're doing here at the Atlanta Speech School so that we can, the goal is to reach potentially an infinite number of children and students, right? So that we can scale the work that we're doing and share this information, not just to the students in our building. All right, so thinking about change, right? So many of you are here because you need a change of some sort, right? And so when we think about change, We know that in order for change to take place, it happens with a deep reading brain is essential, right? And so we feel that if child-facing adults have the knowledge, skills, and agency to implement these three things, then children will be well on their way to having on their way to a path of having their own kind of self determination. That's what I'm looking for. Self-determination. So if you have a healthy brain development in prenatal care, if children have healthy brain development in prenatal care, language and literacy in birth through 5 care, and then the science of reading instruction in K through 3, we know that the importance of these 3 components in order to provide necessary change. So if children have healthy brain development in prenatal care, language and literacy in birth to 5 care, and the science of reading instruction in K3, then children will read proficiently and be on the path of a life to self-determination. And so a lot of the work that we do here at the Rollins Center on campus is grounded in these 3 prerequisites because we understand how essential they are. All right, next slide, Justin. And so this is just kind of a reminder to everyone about the importance of us being anchored by the science, right? And so when we think about reading is actually not innate like talking is, right? But the drive to communicate is. So from birth, our brains are hardwired to speak language, but not necessarily read it. And so that's why it's so important that we are anchored in the science and that we are sharing worldwide from the science of what actions adults can take in order to form a child's brain, giving them an early start towards reading. And so any child-facing adult, any adult that works with children should know these actions so that, again, these students and children can be on a path to self-determination. And we're only going to be able to get there when we're making sure that we go back to the science of how children's brains develop and how they learn how to read. And of course, none of this would be possible if it wasn't for our wonderful, wonderful partners. We couldn't do any of this work without our partners. So on the screen here, you see some of our key partnerships that we have. And the Rollins Center, we work with any organization where child-facing adults work to improve child outcomes positively. And so that could be public school districts, birthing hospitals, community programs, child care programs. We are just committed to working with others who are also committed to this work. And we're very grateful for our partnerships as we scale this work for sure. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about our core values when it comes to what we value on Cox Campus. So again, when we think about Cox Campus, this is kind of our way to scale the work that we're doing here at the Atlanta Speech School. And so these are the values that we strive to instill in the work that is offered on Cox Campus. And we hope that everyone who joins Cox Campus connects to each of these values as well. And so what we want you to do for just a moment, we want you to kind of look at each of the core values and choose one core value that resonates with you the most and just pop that in the chat. So we'll give you about 30 seconds to just kind of look over each one and just type the one in the chat that resonates with you the most. I'm saying essential, a lot of empowering, a lot of essential, connecting. Yep, absolutely, lots of empowering. I love that. So this is the hope that we have not only for those who join Cox Campus, but we also want to make sure that we are kind of keeping these core values in mind as we go through this year-long journey together, right? We want to be able to implement all of these core values as we do this work together, because we understand how important it is in order to make an impact for students in the area of reading and literacy. So hopefully, we will kind of stay connected to these values as we do this work together this year.
Awesome. Thank you, Anisha. So now what I want us to do is I want us to focus on understanding our why. Why are we engaging in a national literacy cohort, especially focused on leadership and implementation? And so the reason is simple. It's literacy and justice for all. And it's really this idea that every student deserves and has that right to read, and every educator and leader has the responsibility to help children do that. And so we want to make sure that we are all grounded in the same belief that this work is critically important, because we understand it's the gateway for children being able to decide, like Anisha said, their own future and to live a life of self-determination. Because literacy rates in our country right now are really tied to zip code, race, ethnicity, and it keeps equity and justice out of the reach of so many. And so we want to center ourselves as leaders in this space as disruptors and people who are dismantling systems and structures that are keeping students from being everything that they can be. So we've been engaging in this work. Just so you have a little bit of background about what Literacy and Justice for All is, it is an initiative that is supporting the science of reading and getting structured literacy into schools. And so currently we're partnering with Atlanta Public Schools, Marietta City Schools, and KIPP. But we're also partnering in this same project with people around the nation. I think it's 200,000 on Cox campus to achieve literacy and justice for all. And so a lot of the work that we're going to be doing together and a lot of the conversations that we're going to be having will be from that shared experience that we're gaining while we're in the field to move this work forward. I want you to take a moment to look at this infographic. This is from the Reading League, and I love the clarity of this. So the very first question says, how many children learn to read? And this is shocking to me when we see that the green students are the ones who do in an average classroom learn to read, and the red are the ones who are not. I really think in some ways, the lack of reading ability and proficiency in our schools is America's dirtiest secret, because people that I know that are outside of education are unaware of these startling statistics. But there's really some magic and some hope, maybe not even magic, but when you look below that, how many students can learn to read? 95% of students can learn to read, that they have the cognitive abilities to be able to. And so this just really paints a very clear picture that we have to do something different in the way that we are setting up systems and structures that support literacy success in school. And so I just want you to take a moment, look at this, and if you have any thoughts, if you have any anything that was surprising, go ahead and drop it in the chat. What is something on here that is surprising for you as you're viewing it? Yeah, the percent of how students learn, yeah. The majority of our students require or need that systematic phonics instruction, that structured literacy. That is surprising. 65% cannot read proficiently, right? That I think is a number that most people outside of education don't know. And so that's really why we're doing this. And I do want to be very clear that reading proficiency is not the goal of the work that we're doing. It's really this idea of building students that have deep reading brains. Reading proficiency is a part of that, but just saying that we want students to be able to read proficiently is a low bar. We instead want students to read with the ability to think critically, to take different perspectives, and to do something with the knowledge that they're gaining. And so I want to raise that as a common understanding with the cohort that's going to be joining us, that literacy alone and just saying, oh, we just want them to read proficiently is not our goal. Instead, we want them to have the skill to be able to choose a path of their own and to change the world around them.
And Justin, I'll just add there, one of the things that kind of stood out to me is the 95%, I think, can be surprising to some people, because a lot of times you think maybe 80%, if we could just get to 75% or 80%. But I think that is a perfect example of the bar can be set very high and students will meet it if we put those systems and structures in place that they need.
Definitely. And I love to think about that 95% next to these numbers, right? And so this was the national report card data from 2015, 2017, and 2019. And we all know that the pandemic has happened since that time. And so, of course, the data probably hasn't gotten any better. And if it has, that's even more alarming to me, right? Because that means in disruption with different literacy instruction, like that's just concerning, right? Or even with the lack of literacy instruction, and maybe the data improved. I know that you can see that in a few places. But for me, I think this just makes it really clear that we have work to do, and it starts at the systems level. It starts with leadership at the top, and not just saying, teachers, we need you to change it. We have to create those conditions and ensure that they are set up for success to make those changes. Here's the challenges we face when we think, and if we move even more deeply, that 35% of fourth graders are proficient. We saw that was pre-COVID, but there's more data. So Ed Week reported that only 5% of teachers report that they were taught how to teach reading. 5%. And if I think back to my college years, and Anisha, probably you too, like that was a little bit of the time that we spent in the classroom, right? As a college student. And so when we consider the impact that has to shift, 75% of teachers reported using 3Qing, which we know is a debunked method of teaching kids to read. And then the most widely used curriculums are in opposition to the science of reading. So those are just things to think about as we think about this challenge that we face to move to that 95% of students who can read. Louisa Moat says this we know that reading failure can be prevented in all but a small percentage of children with serious learning disorders. It is possible to teach most students how to read if we start early and follow the significant body of research showing which practices are most effective. So what sticks out to me here, and I'm wondering if it sticks out to you too, is that actually put it in the chat, like what words stick out to you and really like you think this is the answer. What are the words that show what the answer is? What do we have to do? Yes, Susan, you nailed it, right? So we have to start early. I love this saying that prevention is cheaper and more effective than intervention. So if we can start early, we're definitely able to close that gap, follow the research, right? Follow those that body of research showing those practices that are the most effective. We're going to move now into understanding the what. So we talked about the why, but what are we going to be covering in this cohort? And what can you expect knowledge-wise to build as a part of joining the cohort? This is a key idea that leaders must design and implement systems and structures that support literacy success. And I have two images here. So the first image, that little green, is really the image or a symbol that's representing systems, those things that have to be in place to keep the work moving forward effectively. And then I have the target that represents goals. And I want us to think about goals and systems and structures. So everyone has a goal. I've seen it over and over and over again, and you have too, right? A goal that we want all of our students in our school to be able to read. Here's the real truth, and I love that. I'm going to show you all a quote in just a second by the author that says this, but winners and losers both have goals. They all want to win, right? But it's how we go about it that really impacts our ability to win. And it's what are those structures and systems that are in place to support winning. And so one of the things that we're going to do as a part of this cohort is guide you through a process that helps you identify systems and structures that maybe need support or rethinking in your organization. Here are a few of those systems and structures that we have to think about and that we'll look at through the lens of a literacy scan together when we begin this work. So goals, objectives, and priorities, assessment, instructional practices and materials, instructional time, differentiated instruction and grouping, administration, organization, and communication, and then, of course, professional development. There's a quote by James Clear that I don't think could be any more clear, and I love this quote. It says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And so that is why we're not just focusing on what is our end goal. Of course, we want to create a literacy vision that has goals, right? But we really want to pay attention to those systems, because the systems are the things that support the goal. And Anisha, I'm going to turn it over to you in just a moment, but I want everyone to take a moment. And if you have a note next to you, or a Post-it note, or a sheet of paper, write down this. What is your intention for wanting to join a cohort that is focused on transforming literacy practices through this implementation? What's your intention? What do you really want to, what goal do you want to achieve as a part of being a part of this cohort? And I want us to think on that as we continue to move through this session, and as you begin to engage with this work. So what is your intention for joining this group? And then Anisha, if you want to go ahead and introduce them to the wheel of equitable literacy outcomes.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. So in order to kind of create these systems, or maybe revamp some of your current systems that Justin was talking about, we need to think about the 6 elements of equitable literacy outcomes. And so on your screen, Justin, if you'll go to the next slide for me, just so they can see it a little bit bigger. So here are our 6 elements of equitable literacy outcomes. So when we think about these systems that need to be in place in order to meet the goals that we have for our schools or our districts, we have to look at teacher professional learning. So teachers and leaders must engage with high quality professional learning that aligns with the science of reading. It's a non-negotiable, it needs to happen. It's an important part of ensuring that these systems are put into place. All right, we also need to focus on instructional coaching. So we need to leverage the capacity that is there through our instructional coaches or our reading specialists to implement those coaching cycles that build that educator knowledge and expertise. Because we know the teachers are the ones that need to make this happen, but we've got to support teachers in making that happen. So we've got to build their capacity. Core reading programs. So of course you all have curriculums in your different organizations, but we need to make sure that the curriculum that you have is backed by science. And not only is it backed by science, but it also has supplemental materials that cover phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, fluency, morphology, and syntax. It's not enough to just take one curriculum and follow it and nothing else. You have to have science-backed curriculum as well as supplemental materials. Culturally responsive practices and materials. This is super important. We want our students, if they're going to become those self-directed learners, right? We want them to be able to see themselves in the curriculum. We want to honor their cultural differences. We want to recognize those cultural differences and show them that it's what makes them special and unique and wonderful. And so it's important that those differences are recognized and that students are seen in their curriculum. They see themselves in their curriculum. Data and assessment, of course, we know is important. It's important to have assessments that are effective and efficient, right? And it's also important that the data that you are yielding is reliable data. You can get data all day, right? But is it reliable? So that's an important point. And then last but not least, MTSS and intervention. So ensuring that our tier 1 instruction, of course, first and foremost, is where it needs to be. And then that you have an infrastructure beyond tier 1 in place that provides preventative framework for reading, as well as appropriate interventions as needed. So we really, Justin's going to talk a little bit more specifically about each of these, but we feel that these 6 elements are crucial in order to kind of revamp or create the systems that we're talking about.
So Anisha, thanks for the explanation of those This will be used as a lens for us to look through the change that we're trying to make in conjunction with some of the coursework that you will be taking as you move throughout Cox campus in the cohort. So, for example, if we're talking about early literacy, what teacher professional development needs to take place? How does this impact MTSS and intervention? What assessments, what high quality instructional materials and or components need to be included in our core reading program. So we'll be looking at those each time that you go through a course on Cox campus. So let's dig more deeply into these. And I just want to do this so that you have a clear understanding of the depth that we're going to go into and what you can expect to learn and engage in as we move through our cohort. So as we look at teacher professional learning, we're going to utilize Cox campus and its resources to support professional learning in your organization and to transform instructional practices. We're going to learn structures for guiding educators and leaders from knowledge to action. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But what are those structures that we can use to really make sure that we're practicing and implementing what we've learned, and so that teachers and leaders can transfer that into action in their schools and classrooms. We're going to experience protocols and routines that can be used in developing educators and leaders. And then we're going to discover teacher knowledge surveys that can be used to measure current realities in your school. So where are they with their knowledge of structured literacy and the science of reading and specific domains? And so we'll give you a tool that can be used to measure that. With instructional coaching, one of the things that we're going to do as a cohort of leaders is engage in identifying, as we go through those courses, the knows and shows for each course that influence coaching moves. And when we think about knows and shows, we're really talking like, what are those big buckets of knowledge that school leaders and district leaders and organizational leaders need to know? Of course, we're not expecting you to be an expert, but there are pieces of information that are critical to moving this work. And then what are those actions that you should be able to clearly see taking root in classrooms and schools as a result of the knowledge that has been built? And so we'll be giving you a tool that you can use as you engage in taking the online coursework to support that. We'll explore the Cox campus model for instructional coaching and see how that applies to the work. We'll engage in sample coaching opportunities using an if-then document that we're going to create for each course. And so that is really, if you see this, then do this. Here's a resource that can support in that coaching. And then we'll utilize implementation monitoring forms to guide instructional coaching and professional development. And so all of those resources will be available to you as we move through the cohort. When we think about culturally responsive practices, we're going to have an opportunity to critically reflect on our current leadership and instructional practice, to promote and create inclusive and diverse learning environments, to think about what it looks like to develop culturally responsive educators and leaders in the buildings and organizations where we serve, to consider how we can engage parents and caregivers across contexts and of different backgrounds, and then to really push each other to lead with equity and access in mind. The next section is the core reading program, and I like to refer to this as high quality instructional materials, because we do want to name that, like when we say core reading program, it's really what are the components that we're using to ensure that students are engaging in the right instruction, not that, hey, here's a box that is going to solve all of the issues or solve all of the problems with instruction. A core tenet or belief that we have is that practices, not programs, change instruction, right? We have to change practices, not just change programs and give them something new. We have to really influence and change those practices. And so we'll be looking at giving you some tools to examine current instructional programming with a curriculum inventory. We'll learn the characteristics of high quality instructional materials. We'll discover resources that support structured literacy. One of the things that I think you'll really walk away with from this cohort is a bank of resources to really bring this work to life in schools or organizations that you serve. We'll utilize a curriculum evaluation tool to determine if curriculum is aligned to the science of reading and support structured literacy. And then we'll look at what are typical literacy practices and then what is structured literacy, and be able to really gauge where we are in that kind of when we're looking at that. Do we fall in the typical literacy practices camp, or do we fall in the structured literacy, and how do we begin to make the move from implementing typical literacy practices to ensuring that structured literacy is available for all students? Now thinking about data and assessment, we're going to explore diagnostic and screening assessments and tools that clearly identify student needs. We'll build sample assessment plans that are focused on the science of how students learn to read. We'll learn how to track student learning through regular progress monitoring tools and assessment, how to utilize a decision-making tree to guide the assessment administration, and then examine current assessments and data processes within your organization. And then finally, with MTSS and intervention, we're going to focus first on strengthening Tier 1 instruction as a top priority through scheduling and implementing evidence-based practices. We know that we can't intervene our way out of a Tier 1 problem. If Tier 1 core instruction is not providing what students need, providing more small groups and more support is never going to fully close that gap. So we need to make sure that our core instruction for Tier 1 is rooted in evidence, and that the instructional practices and strategies we're using are really supporting students. We want to set up communication structures that support educators and students, identify what those effective interventions are, and then determine who needs to be around this table when we're planning for organizational change to ensure that there's alignment and effectiveness. Because we know that when we make a change in one area, it tends to impact, there's a domino effect. And so how can we get ahead of that work as we are looking at supporting all students? So I want to show you, and this comes from just the the science of implementation. This is called the active implementation model. How this works is that when you have effective innovation working with implementation strategies, effective innovations working with implementation strategies, there's effective implementation and the context is right. That means that the conditions for learning are right and the conditions for making change are right. That's when you begin to see outcomes. And so we'll dig more into this as we talk through implementation and what does that implementation process look like. What we've done is we've really kind of narrowed it down to a very simple equation that is actually very loaded. We like to say that knowledge plus action leads to positive outcomes for students. And so what this means is that so often in organizations, we want to move fast in a hurry because we feel the sense of urgency. And so we empower people and we say, take action, take action, take action. But oftentimes they do so without the knowledge to take action in meaningful ways. And when they take action before having that knowledge bank, what happens is that it leads to frustration, it leads to a lack of clarity, it leads to confusion, and ultimately ineffective implementation. And so the model that we use is we build knowledge first, and then we empower and give educators and leaders the opportunity to practice taking action. And when you build knowledge and then take action, that leads to alignment, that leads to clarity, and that leads to effectiveness of implementation. It is important to note here that knowledge and action have to happen at the classroom level, the school level, and the organizational and district level. And so for the sake of our cohort, the classroom level is really addressed through Cox Campus. At the school level and organizational level, that's how we're going to take what is Cox Campus telling us, and then how do we ensure that we know what those changes are, both adaptive and technical, kind of not those quick fixes, but those things that can be done pretty easily. And then what are those adaptive and mindset changes that we really have to think about? Where are we going to have to apply some change management and some mindset shifting work with the people that we serve to get them to a new place? And so we'll be focusing at the school level and the organizational level for the implementation piece. So I just want to be very clear on that yes, we're going to show you some things that could happen in the classroom because those are things you'll be looking for and wanting to see, but we'll really be focusing on those structures and systems, the action that organizational and district leaders would need to take to bring about change. So our end goal at the end of the cohort, we really want you to be able to walk away with the knowledge and the skills and the agency to create an implementation framework for transforming literacy practices in your organization. And walking through the steps of implementation, like the exploration, the installation, what does initial implementation look like, and then what does full implementation look like, knowing that this is not overnight change, that it takes time and it takes consistency and it takes commitment, and that there's several layers, but we're hoping that you'll walk away from this cohort with a really clear framework of how you can enact change in your organization. Awesome. So now understanding the how. Anisha, I'm going to turn this over to you so that we can talk about like, how are we going to do this? How are we sharing all this information that we just talked about with you in four simple sessions? So here we go.
Absolutely. Thanks, Justin. So what we are going to be doing is we're going to be doing kind of some asynchronous work as well as some synchronous work. And so you will be coming together with us 4 times throughout the year, in October, December, January, and March. And then what will happen is when you're with us, we will be talking through the assignments. We will talk about application tasks, where it's going to be a lot of community conversations. And that's what the virtual PLC will look like when we are all together. When we are not together, you all will be taking the online coursework. So as you can see, during the fall semester, you'll have roughly 2 courses per session that you will have to take on your own time. And then in order to be prepared to come back to our conversation, prepared to talk about what actionable steps need to be taken in order to kind of meet these goals and change these systems. So it's really important that you all are kind of ready to be able to come and engage with us during these sessions, but also taking time to carve out time outside of these hours that you can work on your own, maybe work in small groups with your literacy leadership teams in order to get the online coursework done outside of when we come together in the virtual PLC.
Awesome. So I want to show you on Cox Campus. If you go to coxcampus.org and you click on educators up at the top, and then you would click on kindergarten through 3rd grade, that will take you to the K through 3 courses. If you're trying to plan out like how much time is this really going to take, this will show you right next to the course. So you can see that early literacy, it takes 2.5, 2.5 training hours, and then systematic and explicit phonics instruction takes 2 hours. So I just wanted to point that out so that as you're thinking about like this commitment, you'll know how much time to really bank for. So the virtual PLCs, what's going to take place when we get together for those 2 hours? 2 hours seems like a lot of time, but when you're thinking about transforming systems and structures, it's not really that much time. And within that 2 hours, we'll discuss those big buckets of knowledge, like I said, and then what are those actions from that course content that we want to consider with implementing within our organization at a systems level. We'll really name the technical and adaptive challenges that come along with that new learning. I like to say that unlearning is the new learning, right? Like there is so much unlearning that takes place in this because we have to undo what we've been taught over time, and that can be uncomfortable. And so I want to be very honest that there are going to be moments of discomfort where we're going to have to let go of some things that we've probably done in the past to be able to see a new way forward. You'll experience models of major instructional shifts. So if it doesn't look like this, then what does it look like? And we'll show you very clearly what that looks like. We'll discuss the applied implications using the wheel of equitable outcomes. We'll have a moment to do some reflections on the application task that you've been given. So after each session, we'll say, hey, between now and the time that we get back together, here's a task that we want you to do that's connected to our work. And so we'll reflect on that. And then we'll examine a problem of practice with practitioners and experts. I'm really excited. We've had the opportunity to really create some friends in this work that are experts at the national level that impact really the creation of our Cox Campus courses too. And so Deb Glazier, Margie Gillis, and Mary Dahlgren will all be joining us at some point throughout the cohort to engage in conversation and to really connect with y'all on a really a personal level. So it'll be a conversation with an expert, not so much a sit and get webinar, so they can really respond and reflect in real time. So that's really exciting, along with practitioners that are engaging this work that are 2 years ahead, 5 years ahead, and some that are really in the midst of it right now that are in the weeds doing the work. And so initial implementation like we're doing in Marietta and KIP and APS. So I'm really excited about that connection opportunity for this cohort. So the time commitment, just big picture, 2-hour live virtual PLCs, there'll be 4 of those in the year, about 2.5 hours of application work between the sessions, And then of course, whatever time it will take you to complete that online coursework. Okay, so now hopping into kind of an ending point in some ways, we just wanted to be very clear on like, what is this cohort and what is it not? And so starting with what it is not. It's not a quick fix or a direction manual for transforming literacy practices in your organization. So we are definitely providing guidance, but it's not going to be, here's 120 pages to tell you exactly what to do. So we don't want you to expect that, because it is going to take a lot of critical thinking and context application. It is not a passive experience. It's not going to be a setback and just listen situation. It's going to be something that requires more out of us. We're not going to push or sell a new idea, model, or project. So we're not trying to sell you anything. We're not trying to, we feel very confident that this is the work that matters to ensure that students receive an equitable education and that life of self-determination. It's not an opportunity that's meant to be experienced in isolation. And so I want everyone to hear this, that this is kind of an each one bring one situation, right? Like if there's someone in your organization that can help you influence making this change, bring them along. If it's a group of 2 or 3 or even 4 of y'all that want to join together so that you can start exploring, like, what does this implementation look like? The more the merrier with that. So pass along the kickoff information that's on September 22nd that you'll hear about in just a second. And then it's not an entirely pre-planned course of study. It is planned out in great detail. Anisha and I have been working very hard to make sure that this is a meaningful experience for you, reflecting on the work that we've been doing and the learning that we've been doing. And so I want you to know that it's not entirely pre-planned, because here's what it is. It is going to be a committed group of leaders who are passionate about implementing structured literacy in their organization. So we are wanting people who are out there to dismantle systems and to really change and disrupt what's happening so that students can have better outcomes. It is going to be a collaborative experience where active engagement is required so that your intentions that you named earlier can be met. It's going to be a community sharing knowledge and experience together that's anchored in the science of reading. And then it's going to be responsive to the needs where you are, responsive to the conversations that we have, responsive to maybe conversations that take place in our Cox campus online community. So the cohort will be in a group where we can touch base online in between sessions, and we can share resources and ideas and problems that you may be experiencing as you're thinking about implementing this work. So we are so excited about what this cohort is not, but also really excited about what this cohort is.
All right, so as we kind of wrap things up, we kind of shared with you our vision of what we want this cohort to be and what we plan for it to be, but we also want to hear from you. What do you want to get out of this? So if you'll take a moment, just think about that and put that in the chat. We want to know what you want out of this experience. Faith says a community of leaders and support. Absolutely. Because again, as Justin stated earlier, we don't want this to happen in silos, right? We believe that change happens with collective action and accountability for sure.
Yeah, what are some other things that you're hoping to get from this experience? And awesome, a structured process that will impact student success.
I love that word, structured. Alfreda, I believe that's how you say that.
Knowledge to affect change. The knowledge to move your district towards science of reading. Awesome. That is definitely our goal. Tools and processes to shift the mindset of masses in a tangible way. Yes, that change management is tough, right? Mm-hmm. Brandon, support for the science of reading, how to better support teachers and coaches. Awesome. And so we're going to capture everything you're putting in the chat and really consider that as we develop as we further develop the cohort, right? Because we do want to be responsible. We want this to be something that you're showing up for in a committed way every single session, and that you feel like it's really meaningful. A thorough understanding of SOAR, the research supports it in practical ways to support schools in effective reading instruction. So I just got a private message that said, what is the cost? Anisha, can you tell them the grand total for this experience?
Well, hopefully you all have saved up, because the cost is absolutely free.
It is absolutely free. And so free to you, but funded by amazing philanthropists and generous organizations that support our work day in and day out. And so I'm sure that Laura or someone can drop in the chat some additional information about that, but it is absolutely free. It is the best price ever. It's actually the hottest going rate out there for this kind of work. So we are so excited about that.
And as Justin said earlier, we're not trying to sell you anything because it's all free. We definitely believe in this work. We believe it's the right work, and we are excited and hopeful that you all will join us on this journey with this work.
I would love for you right now to make a commitment that if you are here alone, that you can invite. So think about someone that you can shoot an email to as soon as this is over with, to invite them to the September 22nd kickoff event. And so I will be glad to post those dates again. I'm going to post them, but also know that we're moving into a time of Q&A. So Anisha, if you'll start that, I will change the slide back so they can see the dates.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so with the time that we have left, we have about 4 minutes left. Are there any questions that you all have that maybe we haven't answered? Anything that's still lingering before you kind of fully commit to this work, or any hesitations of any kind?
Hey there, it's Faith. I have, you may
Faith.
have answered this. I'm sorry, I was kind of like on a bus coming back with teachers, and now I'm in a space where I can ask questions. But
Yeah.
I was wondering, so when teachers do the year-long program as well, so if my teachers are signing up for the year-long program and I'm doing the leader year-long program, is it like, am I previewing a little bit of what they're about to do? Or I don't know if that's the right answer, but or a question, but I guess I'm trying to see, like, if they're seeing something, am I also taking that alongside them as well? Or does this kind of prepare me for what my teachers are also taking?
So Anisha, I'll answer and then feel free to pop on. I will say that, yes, you will be previewing because they're going to spend the entire year digging into phonemic awareness and phonics. Y'all are going to actually complete that coursework by October 4th. And so I do want to make that very clear. So the PLC dates, that coursework will be completed before you show up on October 4th, right? And so the coursework for assessing our students' targeted small group instruction will be completed before the December 6th session. So just make sure that you understand how that flows. So y'all will complete early literacy, which it really is phonemic awareness, alphabet knowledge, all of those pieces, and systematic explicit phonics instruction by October 4th. And they'll actually be working on that work in detail throughout the entire year-long journey.
Okay,
So,
that was really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
and then
sure.
I guess when you're saying like recommend folks, so if I have teachers who are already like, so we've started this science of reading journey last year, but if I have teachers who like really bought into it and kind of have taken it, would those teachers be more on like the leader track, or should they do the teacher side of things?
That's a great question, Faith. I would say, so I don't want to narrow leaders to being school leaders, district leaders, organizational leaders, but what I would encourage you to do is create an implementation team that's really helping lead this work and maybe joining like this as a cohort that way. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that's a great idea.
It definitely needs to be people who are going to take this work and begin to flesh it out. Like, what does this implementation look like in our building with our teachers, and so forth.
Okay, thank you so much.
Cool, thanks for coming off mute. Any other questions that you're thinking about? The implementation team is actually something that we utilize in the schools where we're working. And so we have implementation teams in Marietta, that I know that in the other schools right now, they're creating those kind of that layer of leadership. But it's important, right, that you have people, because this work, I think this is important. It takes the energy, the passion, the enthusiasm of a grassroots movement, but also the strategy, the structure, and all the brain power of a top-down kind of initiative, right? So it takes both of those things. But yeah, it's definitely a bottom-up, top-down, everybody doing this work. I cannot see any way that this work is successful without leaders at the top fully engaging.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
do you have, sorry, last question.
No, you're fine.
You have like, okay, so if I have some ideas on who should be on the implementation team. Also, I'm at a district level, so inviting like school-based leadership as well. Do you have like I just took a screenshot of what you just put on there with like this coursework, but do you have like a one-pager that I could share with those folks?
Yep. So what we can do, and we'll follow up with you all after this through email, is we'll give you, if you join this, I'm sure we captured your email when you registered. We'll follow up with you after this and give you the flyer that the information that you just took a picture of came off of. Also, they just dropped it in the chat as well, that PDF there, but we'll definitely make sure to get it to you both ways.
Yes, we will make sure that we'll send all the dates in the follow-up email, Erica.
Awesome. Any other questions before we close out? We you know what? Even with our technical snafu, we ended at 5, so I'm proud of that. So if you have not joined Cox Campus, we want to encourage you to go to coxcampus.org, sign up, go ahead and begin exploring the community there. On September 22nd, when you join us for the kickoff, we will give you all the directions for joining our private coaching group on there and really lay out in grand detail what each session will look like coming up. And so September 22nd will be a critical date to ensure that whoever you're bringing with you is coming along. We'll probably be checking in with you through email to get a better idea of how we can support you in gathering some other people to join you, and to confirm and say, hey, is this something you're looking for? If not, how can we support you? How can we support you that way as well? So here you go. You want to take that one away, Anisha?
Yeah, so just as Justin said, we will see you all again on September 22nd, hopefully. And we are so thankful for you joining us today. We hope that we have convinced you to continue on this journey with us throughout the school year. And we thank you so much for your time, and we hope you enjoy the remainder of your day.